So you heard me talk about the Ned line of products before, but I want to give you a little bit of update of what's been going on with my deep sleep. But before I do, did you know that 50 million Americans suffer from sleep disorders? And many of them are prescribed sleeping pills, which they subsequently become addicted to. I've seen it in my practice. So for me, I've been using the Ned sleep formula for about a month and a half. And I just ran out of my first bottle. And I reached out to Ned immediately and said I need another bottle. Why? Because it's been helping me not only get to sleep faster, but staying asleep. And how do I know? I've been using my Oura Ring and been seeing quantitatively better sleep scores ever since I've been implementing this, about a week into it, right? So Ned, the tincture, has blends of CBN, which is a powerful cannabinoid that promotes sleep, with 750 milligrams of CBD made from the world's purest single source, a full spectrum hemp oil, and organic, wild-crafted botanicals, which are used in traditional medicine to foster rest. So I can't say enough good things about Ned and their line of CBD. You're going to have one of the most transparent companies out there, the purest and the most potent, 100% backing by me, and it's helpful. I've seen it in my own experience and the people who've been using it. It's really good stuff. So as a give back to the Heal Thyself listener, you're going to receive 15% off your first purchase and 20% off of your first membership purchase. Memberships, they offer great perks. You're going to get 15% off of every single purchase. Go to helloned.com/DRG and enter the code DRG at checkout. That's HELLONED.com/DRG. And you're going to get 15% off of your first one-time order or 20% of your first subscription order plus free shipping. All right, everyone, I want to introduce you to Aura Organic. Aura Organic has been on my radar for quite a while. Around last year, I started talking a little bit about collagen and looking for quality collagen out there. The thing is, me as a vegan, I wanted to look for the best vegan collagen. And what I found was a company that made really high quality vegan collagen with the right formulations, then a really great gut powder for gut health, great taste, great texture, great purity. So after they sent me some of their products, they sent me a green powder, right? And if you recall, I did a show on green powders talking about how quality is so important, particularly in the adulteration of heavy metals like lead. So me, I'm a busy guy. I admit sometimes I don't make enough time to cook, but every single morning I make a nutrient-dense smoothie without fail. I put some vegetables, I put some fruit, I put some of my favorite powders, but now I've been using the Aura Organic green powder, particularly because it's nutrient dense and has a lot of the antioxidants that I need to go through my day. So Aura Organic's a plant-based organic nutrition company. It's got an incredible line of products that assist you in living a healthy life, right? But I want to be specific and talk about their organic greens powder, the Easy Bean Green. So green powders can be adulterated with heavy metals. We went over that. Aura Organic made my top green powder. Their green powder has over 20 different organic vegetables, grasses, herbs, and superfoods, both land and sea. 3 servings of your daily recommended vegetable intake, which is why I put it in the smoothie every morning. Certified organic, certified vegan. It's an easy way to get your daily greens and micronutrients. And my favorite part, of course, super transparent, third-party tested. Go on the website. They put their COAs right on the website. No artificial sweeteners, no artificial flavors, no artificial ingredients, right? You can find Aura at Ulta, Whole Foods, Vitamin Shop. But you can also get it online at www.aura.organic. That's www.ora.organic, and use the code Heal Thyself, one word, at checkout, and you're going to get 10% off of your next purchase. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Heal Thyself. Thank you for joining the show. Really good one coming up today. We have an awesome knowledge bomb on something super important. Pretty much the way that we are going with our health as far as fertility is down a very dark road. So I'm here to shed a little bit of light about what's going on, why is it going on, and what are some of the solutions, right? You can't say something without some solutions, right? We need to know where we're going to go. Also, special guest, Dr. Michael Goran. He's coming in here and talking about sugar. Sugar's effects on child's cognitive behavior, on their overall health, on their gut health. How is sugar so ubiquitous in our food? How did it sneak in here? And what is the overall effect that it's happening, that's going on with our children? And what are some solutions? Again, solutions. Where are we finding solutions? How can we reduce the sugar consumption in our children, help change their palate? Super important. He's going to talk about his new book, Sugarproof. And we're going in. We're diving right in. Let's get to this knowledge bomb. All right, everyone. The chemicals in our environment are affecting male and female fertility. We've known this for a while, But if you're looking to get pregnant now and know someone who wants to get pregnant, you got to understand there's certain factors that you may think are out of your hands or may not know of that are absolutely affecting fertility, right? And it's not just our own fertility, it's our friends' fertility, right? It's our other family members' fertility. It's happening throughout the world. So to me, outside of the stress and diet bubble, I believe environmental toxins are the number one factor for fertility issues. And let's dive into this. So very recently, the renowned Dr. Shana Swan, the environmental and reproductive epidemiologist, in other words, what she does is she looks how the environment affects reproduction through the lens of how many people are affected, what the distribution is, and how do we possibly control it. Well, anyway, recently, she came out with her new book. Now, you might have seen a headline that says, men's penises are shrinking, or fertility is at risk, healthy fertility is at risk for the future. And it pretty much blew up the internet a few weeks ago. But her book, Countdown, How Our Modern World is Threatening Sperm Counts, Altering Male and Female Reproductive Development, and Imperiling the Future of the Human Race. It is not a doomsday headline. It is absolutely where we're going with this. So this is why I'm bringing this up with such more impassioned than maybe another podcast, is because it's really important for us to learn and listen. Now, you may not even be in the business right now of making a baby, right? Or you may have had children and said no more. But here's where we empower ourselves to tell each other, tell our friends, tell our family, because it is a really important topic, right? It's about her book. It's about the ways in which chemicals in the modern environment are changing and endangering humans sexually, overall, and our fertility, and it's on the grandest scale. And I say we because it's really important that we're all responsible for this situation, right? It's what's affecting our planet. Remember, the moment you take responsibility for something is the moment you have the ability to change it. So we're now seeing the byproduct of irresponsible behavior by industry, loose regulations by the FDA and the EPA, and lack of informed consumption by us. And the threat is in men and women's fertility. Remember we had the fertility show a while ago? If you're always dropping in and listening, you'll remember Dr. Shala Salem. She came in on episode 92 and we talked all about fertility. And she was talking specifically about how fertility is going down for men and women, and environmental toxins are a big blame for that. That's a big blamer for that. Like, environmental toxins is what we are looking at as the number one factor as to why our fertility is at risk. Okay, so 2017, Dr. Swan co-authored the study, Temporal Trends in Sperm Count, a systematic review and meta-regression analysis. And it was in the Journal of Human Reproduction Update. And the study itself elucidated the body of research that is showing that sperm count is declining fairly rapidly. Between 1973 and 2011, there has been a 50 to 60% decline in sperm concentration and total sperm count in North America, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, with no evidence that it's leveling off anytime soon. But why? The authors believe there's a major component in the role of endocrine disrupting chemicals, right? You couple that with a poor diet, increases in stress, smoking, obesity. But as explained by Dr. Swan, fertility as a whole is declining 1% each year. Miscarriages are increasing 1% each year. Testosterone is decreasing by 1% each year. She says that her research, it suggests that by 2045, sperm count can reach zero. You heard that right. The quote from her book says, in some parts of the world, the average 20-something woman today is less fertile than her grandmother was at 35. Now we know that sperm count and concentration are dropping, fertility is dropping, people are having issues getting pregnant, but also penises are shrinking. Yes, Dr. Swan states that when fetuses are exposed to phthalates, what do we see? An increased likelihood that they're going to be born with a smaller penis overall. Male fetuses exposed to phthalates had shorter anogenital distance, which is the distance between the anus and the genitals. And that's corollary to the volume of the penis. We're seeing all of this happening in fetuses due to this endocrine disrupting chemical. And these chemicals, phthalates, BPA, PFAS, parabens, flame retardants, pesticides, herbicides, especially atrazine, we saw right when they were being mass produced and utilized into the environment and leaking into our daily lives, we saw a decline in sperm health and fertility. And these chemicals are liberally allowed into our environment due to poor regulation. And they're affecting our hormones, fertility, and now we're learning that it's affecting penis size. Let me put this in perspective. There are over 80,000 chemicals that have been let into the environment over the years. 200 or less have been tested for safety, and about 12% have been banned. These chemicals in your food, water, water bottles, personal care products, cosmetics, furniture, beds, cleaning supplies, etc., have relatively no regulation or safety testing. Let's just pause and put that in perspective. These chemicals are innocent until proven guilty. So where are these chemicals found? Well, the phthalates, which are probably the number one, I would say, overall endocrine disrupting chemicals that we're seeing right now that is associated with decreased sperm concentration, decreased sperm counts, decreased fertility, decreased libido, decreased penis size. Phthalates can be found in anything with synthetic fragrance. This is why I talk about fragrance being an umbrella term. It's the most conventional topicals you're going to use, like moisturizers or sunblocks. It's also in lipsticks, also in nail polish. It's in the home as far as cleaning products. It's in your shower curtain, PVC. What's being released, those are plastics. Those are what's happening is these phthalates, they're off-gassing and you're breathing them in. So there's also correlation with phthalates also being implicated in libido levels in women, as I mentioned. What are other ones, though? PFAS. They're having a big disruptive effect in male hormones. It's correlated with reduction in overall semen quality, testicular volume, and penile length. It's also found in plastics, electronics, wrappings, food paper, water. You'll remember the water show, episode number 82. I go into deep details about PFAS being in bottled water. You're also going to find it in Teflon, so anything that's non-stick, big issue because it's going to wreak havoc on your system. And the problem, and why they're called forever chemicals, these PFAS, is that they stay in the body for about 8 to 10 years. That's how long it takes for your body to get rid of them. Atrazine, I mentioned, this is one of the nation's top selling weed killers. It's an herbicide that gets into our water, but it's also sprayed on corn, soybean, sugarcane. You find it on golf courses, which is a big issue. I would never live on a golf course for one of these reasons because it's so highly treated. It's also seen on residential lawns. But you see it disrupting animals in 30 times lower concentrations than the EPA is allowing. UC Berkeley developmental endocrinologist Tyrone B. Hayes, he explained this. Atrazine at levels often found in the environment demasculinates tadpoles and turns them into hermaphrodites, meaning that they're having both female and male sexual characteristics. The herbicide also lowers levels of male hormone testosterone in sexually mature male frogs by a factor of 10, and to levels lower than those of normal male frogs. Unbelievable. We're seeing frogs with smaller testes, smaller ovaries because of this herbicide that is regularly sprayed on your lawn and you may not know it, or the lawn of the person next to you and you may not know it, your neighbor. And he explains the use of atrazine in the environment is basically an uncontrolled experiment, and there seems to be no atrazine-free environment, and it's true, right? It's been around and it's getting all over environment, seeps into the water. We're being affected, animal, ecology, the whole cycle is being affected by these chemicals with poor regulation. And they interfere with our body's natural hormonal system, or the signals that we're getting. It can cross over to the fetus, cross over to the brain, which has a barrier. It cross over to the testes, which has a barrier. So you don't really need that much of a high exposure, right? Because I talked about something called a non-monotonic dose response in past episodes, basically says that even at super low doses, lower than what's allowed in the industry, right, by the industry, FDA, EPA, lower than what they're allowing, is having similar effects that you're seeing in high doses, right? And that's a major problem, right? It's actually a threat to our species if you think about it. Listen to this chilling quote. Of the 5 possible criteria for what makes species endangered, only one needs to be met. The current state of affairs for humans meets at least 3. So all of this doomsday talk, right? Oh my God, we are infertile and what's happening and why are all these chemicals inundating my life and how do I get rid of them? Here are some really powerful interventions that are gonna dramatically reduce that load. How do I know? Because I'm a doctor and I've had patients and I've done interventions like this and I've seen pre and post testing and it works. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I would tell my patients to reduce this endocrine disrupting load. You always start with what you can, right? Get yourself some organic produce first and foremost. A lot of these pesticides have endocrine disrupting chemicals in them. I mentioned atrazine, right? Can get into your food source. We know I mentioned soybean, corn, soy. Get off the processed crap. Remember, whole foods, not necessarily a supermarket, but eating foods in their whole form is better. Less ingredients, the better. Avoid plastic. I talked about it, did a whole show, probably more than 2 shows, 3 shows on BPA already. Get off the water bottles. The threat of BPA and PFAS, which are in the water, are big. Big, big, big. Those are super powerful hormone disruptors. You don't make sure you never put anything overly hot, cold, acidic, or basic in plastic. And opt for some glassware instead of the plastic, all right? Look at the Environmental Working Group database. Again, I've been talking about this since already 2 years. What you can do is go on this database, look at your beauty products, personal care products, cleaning product regimen, and get rid of all the stuff with those synthetic fragrances. I think about my life back in college. Man, I was in the shower. I was using Spring Fresh synthetic soap or Old Spice body wash. I was getting out, drying myself off. I was using Herbal Essence synthetic shampoo, and then I was putting some Aveeno moisturizer on. Then I was spraying on cologne. I was walking all over campus like a walking hormone disruptor, not only affecting myself, but others. That's the problem, right? You smell those scents, and that's disrupting your chemicals. This is why I really dislike perfumes and colognes. But go on their database and find for yourself some of the products that are approved, all right? What else? Home stuff, right? Start moving all of those cleaning supplies, as I mentioned. Look again on the EWG database where you can find high quality cleaning supplies, and also nonstick cookware. If you have Teflon or anything nonstick in your kitchen, throw it away. That's a big no-no. We know that. I did the show on cookware talking about how Teflon is so toxic to the body. It can, if you have a small bird and you're cooking in Teflon and it smokes, the smoke is inhaled by the bird, it's going to kill the bird. But it goes into your food, right? So look for something more like cast iron, ceramic, or stainless steel. And then get the book by Dr. Swan, as I mentioned. The name of the book is Countdown. I have no affiliation with it. I just think it's something that we all should read so we become more informed consumers about what's in our lives. It's definitely nothing to be understated. I don't want to be the one who's saying this and going, oh man, I remember Dr. G was talking about this 10 years ago and now it's in the news. We don't want to wait for that. We don't want mass media, conventional media coverage to sit and wait for them to be telling us, oh no, we're doomed. Now is when we make those interventions. Now is when we empower ourselves. This is called preventative medicine, learning and making those changes. I'm working on getting Dr. Swan on the show. I would love to have her as a guest so we can go even more in depth. I really hope you enjoyed this knowledge bomb. But let's get to this very special guest. I can't wait to speak to Dr. Michael Goran. So important. Sugar consumption is an epidemic. What it does to the body is, on many levels, affecting us from children to adulthood. So let's get into this convo. Really hope you like that knowledge bomb, and let's do it. All right, everyone. Today's special guest, Dr. Michael Goran. Now, he is a researcher, biochemist, and he's professor at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. But really, we're here to talk about something super important. What is the impact of sugar on children? What is the impact on diets overall? What is the impact on cognitive behavior? Well, in his new book, Sugarproof, he talks about all of this. And we're going to learn about some actionable interventions we can make so we can better our children's diets. Doctor, thank you for coming on to the show.
What a pleasure to be here, Dr. G. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. I love that you release a book on sugar, and right on the front, I see a bowl with sugar cubes and a spoon, and it made me think, when I used to eat cereal, it was all sugar. Mm-hmm. I had Lucky Charms, I had the Count Chocula, the Frosted Flakes, and I used to add sugar to it. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about how addicted I was to sugar as a child. And it was in everything. I was thinking about, I had these little snacks called Dunkaroos that I pull it out and have frosting, and I dip these little cookies in it. I would have a toaster strudel in the freezer where it would just, you put in the frosting in it, and it's sugar rich and had jelly in the middle. How inundated are we with sugar as children?
Completely inundated.
Yeah.
70% of processed foods, 80% of foods that are targeted towards children have some form of sugar. I was in the grocery store the other day talking about your Lucky Charms, doing my thing, and I come to the end of the aisle, one of these big displays, Lucky Charms, bright, colored, kids-friendly thing. Everybody has to reach for it because it's magnetic, and 15 grams of added sugar per serving. Most kids would probably pour themselves 2 bowls, that's 30 grams. That's like drinking a soda for breakfast.
Unbelievable.
So, sugar's everywhere, and food companies are basically hijacking kids' taste buds because kids are born with a built-in preference for sweetness. When you were a kid eating all those things, you had a natural increased preference for sweetness. It was supposed to be a protective mechanism from an evolutionary perspective. It was supposed to favor you to like breast milk and to seek out good calories and to avoid toxic berries from the forest floor.
Mm-hmm.
We ain't in that environment anymore. We're in this environment where we're surrounded by sugary foods, and that's what kids are reaching for.
And you mentioned something really important. The industry sort of knows this. One,
Yes.
they know how to create the formula
Yes.
to hijack the taste buds. And then the marketing aspect where they know how to reach children so they're attracted to it. They
Yes.
they want some of that cereal. They want some of that food item. You mentioned the evolutionary tactic that they're using, right? That the taste. So is it that they're just making sugar-rich foods because it's tapping into a child's evolutionary need for survival?
I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's part of it, and I think sweetness sells. You've probably heard of the bliss point, where food companies get the sweetness up to a level. If they're developing a new product, it has to be liked by a certain percentage of their users in tests. And to reach that bliss point, you increase sweetness and you can get more liking. So some of it's masking all the other preservatives and additives that are added to processed foods, and sweetness is there because they know kids prefer sweetness.
So wow, in the morning, like a can of soda for breakfast, basically, just from cereal. What kind of effects is this having on the child throughout the day?
Well, and then of course, in many cases, this would also be accompanied by juice.
Right.
Or pastry, so sugar at breakfast is vitally important. I think the research is showing that high sugar intake in kids at breakfast alters their energy levels. They have rapid energy highs and energy crashes from that sugar, because the sugar is rapidly absorbed and then taken out, and then they crash and go hypoglycemic. So the immediate effects are kind of a disequilibrium almost in energy levels with these rapid highs and lows. But I think hopefully what we'll talk about is ways that we can avoid that.
Yeah.
And that's just the immediate effects acutely of the meal. And then over time, as we talk about in Sugarproof, sugar can affect multiple aspects of kids' development.
So, and then we think about it, right? A child goes in, they've had, 50, 60, 70 grams of sugar in breakfast, goes into school, and they are off the rocker running around, so much energy, crashing. And then they have breakfast from school, tons of sugar, off the rocker, crashing. I wonder if parents or teachers start seeing that as, oh no, my child may have hyperactive disorder, or maybe let's get them on medication to calm them down. Why are we not just looking at sugar first? Why are we not looking at diet first? Where is the dissonance between medicine and reality? What's happening?
That's a great question. I mean, we in the book, we call it the sugar roller coaster. That's exactly what's going on. And it's hard to get off once you're on. I think medicine is a quick fix. I think for a long time there was actually a notion in the medical field that sugar didn't cause hyperactivity. This is still believed to be the case if you look at the literature, which we review in the book. But ask any parent if sugar causes hyperactivity, and they'll say, of course it does.
Right.
Most parents have seen it. It might be unpredictable. It might be different on one day than the other, but studies do show that sugar causes energy highs and energy lows, and most parents don't need a scientific journal for that. They just look at their kids. But the literature, and we believe the studies were not really optimal, because what they did was they compared sugar, and the control or the placebo was an alternative sweetener. So it's calories, sweetness without the calories, thinking that was just like a complete placebo. But now we know that sweeteners, and we can talk about this later, also have similar effects. So the comparison wasn't great. Once you compare sugar with non-sugary food, you definitely see this effect.
The difference.
So I think we've missed it because the scientific literature told us that sugar didn't cause hyperactivity, which is at odds with what most parents will tell you.
One thing that I've always been in awe of is how powerful the sugar industry is at policy, at nutritional interventions, right? At the way we see food being masked with sugar. And it's just lurking in there. Have you, in your research, come through and seen just how powerful that industry is at all?
Well, personally, yes. I've
Yeah.
had I've had personal interactions with the sugar industry who have tried to. I was giving a talk one time, for example, and somebody stood up. People don't usually stand up and ask you questions.
Right,
But
right.
this person stood up. This was a person from the food from beverage industry, and kind of tore apart our research. We've had a lot of pushback from the industry, obviously, just personally, and I think that's one of their tactics too, is to discredit science. But I persevered. I'm a scientist. I follow the data.
Right, right, and put it out there.
Yeah.
Another thing I found interesting is nutritionists, or dietitians, their yearly conference many times is sponsored by Big Sugar, right? Like you'll have Coca-Cola or Pepsi doing talks about how children can drink this and it's fine and it's safe.
It's a source of energy.
And this is research that's being presented to dietitians who what I know, and the ones that I know are like, what the heck is this? But a lot of them are taking that right at face value
Yes.
and going, oh yeah, no, it's fine. You can give your kids. For me, that's crazy to think how powerful an industry is at teaching the very people we look to for dietary advice.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's the situation we're in. The same is happening at scientific meetings that I would regularly go to. Oftentimes, workshops sponsored by the food industry or the sugar industry, beverage industry.
Wow.
So I think it's problematic.
Well, okay, so let's say I have a kid. I don't know anything about this, and my kid is having Lucky Charms for breakfast, a glass of juice, and maybe even a piece of white bread toast, or maybe even wheat bread toast. Still, it's still will converted to the sugar, but then we do that every single day for my child's childhood and adolescent. Is there any research coming out about what are the long-term effects of just having a high sugar diet for these kids?
Yeah, there's studies, short-term, long-term studies. We review them all in Sugarproof, going from literally from head to toe effects on brain development, learning, cognition, memory, across the lifespan. I mean, its effects may be more pronounced sometimes in childhood because of development, but then other organs, gut effects, liver, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, fatty liver disease, which I hope we'll talk about, wasn't even a disease 10 years ago, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Most liver disease used to be alcohol related. Now it's non-alcohol related, the non-alcohol being fructose. So really, and those effects can be short-term or long-term, and often silent. So type 2 diabetes, for example, unfortunately, it is increasing in childhood. You might not see it being actually developing into full-blown type 2 diabetes, but the seed is planted in childhood, and that's what our earlier research showed. And it tied that to sugar, that high sugar diets in childhood creates more insulin resistance, creates more beta cell stress in the pancreas, which might not be manifested then as type 2 diabetes, but it will lead to earlier onset. So these are kind of subtle, slowly evolving chronic diseases that are seeded in childhood that pretty much all can be related to diet and sugar in particular.
Unbelievable, right? That we can make long-term changes in a child's health by just removing a food group that we think is a lot safer than it is. And I always think of sugar as this like caustic substance in a very delicate pipe in the blood vessels running through and tissues and the organs. And what we think is so safe is causing damage, and like you said, the beta cells of the pancreas, and leading to early, maybe not diabetes full blown, but like you said, earlier onset. So instead of maybe when in their 30s, they're getting it when they're 16, 17, 18. I forgot the statistic, but years ago when I was in school, I read how many children have type 2 diabetes. And we saw it as the adult onset diabetes.
Yeah.
But now it's like adolescent onset diabetes.
Can be, yeah. I mean, when I first started in this field, which was over 30 years ago, type 2 diabetes wasn't an issue in childhood, and it was called adult onset diabetes to differentiate it from type 1, which is a complete lack of insulin production in the pancreas. But by 2000, we were starting to see an increase in type 2 diabetes in adults and even in children and teenagers, and each year the numbers are going up.
And you did mention about the liver. Was it the high fructose corn syrup then is leading to, and what is fatty liver? What is, because we like you said, we used to think, drink a ton of alcohol, you'll get a fatty liver that'll turn into hepatitis or cirrhosis, not hepatitis, cirrhosis, and then you'll have liver failure, a piece of liver failure. Now what's happening? Are we seeing that in children?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same pathogenesis, but it's induced not by alcohol, but by sugar and fructose in particular. And some people are saying, fructose is alcohol, but without the buzz. And that's because metabolically, the response is the same. So the liver is this giant filter that removes everything from the circulation that it doesn't want to get to the rest of the body. Drugs, toxins, alcohol. Add to that list fructose, okay, which is in all sugar, and it's higher in high fructose corn syrup. It's higher in fruit-based sugars. It's very high in things like agave. We can talk about that later. But the point is that the liver screens it out from the blood. So over 90% of fructose that gets absorbed in the gut is filtered out by the liver. The glucose, on the other hand, goes around the body for energy. The liver says, I don't want that fructose going everywhere. It filters it out into a pathway. It converts it to fat. That fat, and the same happens with alcohol, that fat from fructose can get stuck in the liver, or it can get repackaged as fat and put back out into the circulation, leading to dyslipidemia, hallmark of cardiovascular disease, high lipids in the blood. Once that fat builds up to a high level, it causes cirrhosis, like you mentioned, just like we used to see in alcoholic liver disease, and then liver failure, liver transplant, liver cancer.
Right.
That process is speeded up, earlier onset. Doesn't mean to say all kids are going to get liver disease. Again, it's a cumulative and slowly evolving over time, but certainly at the high end of the spectrum, in our studies in children and teenagers, we see, unfortunately, high levels of fatty liver disease among children who are overweight. Hispanics are highly susceptible to fatty liver disease because of a genetic mutation in a gene called PNPLA3. So it can happen, but for sure, the process can be accelerated by sugar.
I think you said something very important. When we think about fat in the blood, a lot of people go, well, I don't eat that much fat, or I don't have a fatty meals, or I don't eat greasy foods. But you talked about the conversion of the sugar, right, in the liver, protecting, getting rid of 90%, but the rest being thrown out into the circulation as fat, right? So we have to think about that. Like, eating high amounts of sugar can lead to the cardiovascular disease. It's not just diabetes. A lot of us think, oh, sugar diabetes, right? But it's the cardiovascular aspect too, right? And we lose sight of that a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But so some of the foods that are really dense in fructose are things like high fructose corn syrup. What about agave? What's the problem with agave? People love that as a substitute, and it's in the health industry, and it's everywhere. You can get it at Whole Foods right now.
Yeah, and a couple of years ago, I would have agave in my cupboard because it's good tasting. It's convenient. You can just drop a little bit in your smoothie or in your tea or whatever, and it tastes good. But then we realize that it's actually most agaves are 90% fructose. So high fructose corn syrup that's in a soda is maybe 60% fructose. In agave, it's 90% fructose. So it is very high in fructose, and so are all fruit sugars. And fruit sugars are also increasing in use because they have this healthy sounding buzz around them, but they are high in sugar, and we need to keep that in mind. Sorry, they are high in fructose, so we need to keep that in mind as well.
Right, for the implications, and that it can be hurting the liver of many children out there, especially Hispanic ones, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think about lower socioeconomic populations being a lot of Hispanic children being there, the neighborhood that I came from, and the access to food is sugar rich. You know, we don't have Whole Foods out there. We have bodegas that have cereals that are just so sugar rich, bars, candies, a bunch of sweeteners, maple syrups. It's pretty wild. So I think there's another aspect to this, the socioeconomic, social level, how we can affect this too. But
there's a huge socioeconomic impact on obesity in childhood. We've in one of our earlier studies showed that levels of obesity in children were 7 to 8 times higher in low-income neighborhoods. So, for example, if you get data from Beverly Hills or Malibu or high affluent neighborhoods, there's no epidemic of childhood obesity. But in East LA, for example, 35% of kids are classified with a body weight in the obese range.
Wow. And it's unbelievable because it was pretty regular in my childhood. I've seen that. And I was thinking, not when I was a child, but when I look back, I think, well, why? And it's access to food. That's it. It's literally like quick, poor quality, hyper-processed, palatable food.
Yep.
And that's what's happening with these children.
Which tend to be very high in sugar.
High in sugar, which tend to be high in sugar.
Which I shouldn't say tend to.
They are.
They are.
Yeah, but that's all there is to it. They really are really high in sugar. All right, so look, we have a big problem on our hands. We know that. We know it's affecting children's health acutely, chronically, long-term when they're adults. We can see even the effects of that poor diet in childhood. Now we got parents listening. We got parents viewing. They go, what the heck? What do I do? Where do I start? Do I put other artificial sweeteners? Do I start getting new foods? How do I change my child palate? Because that's the problem with parents. They go, my kid just won't eat. My kid just won't eat it. So where do we start?
Yeah, and I mean that is a very good point because palate and taste is very important in all this, and I know many parents are struggling with this issue. And in the book, in Sugarproof, we have a lot of simple hacks, a lot of strategies. Alternative sweeteners are not the answer. I'll put that right out there directly.
Why? What's the problem with them?
So, many of them, they sound good. It's a fool's gold. It's a perfect anecdote, right? It's sweetness without the calories. What could be better, right? You get the sweetness, you don't get the calories. They don't taste great. Many of them, right? Depending on the particular sweetener, they're all different chemicals of different arrangements. Splenda, for example, or sucralose, the most common in the U.S. Do you know what it is?
Where it's Splenda.
But do you know what it is chemically?
Oh, sucralose? No, I don't know the biochemistry.
It's a sucrose molecule with chlorine on the ends.
Interesting.
Okay, 3 chlorine atoms attached on. I don't know who came up with this crazy idea. Maybe it was an accident. Many of these things were. But it so happens that adding those chlorines makes it hundreds of times sweeter, but it's not absorbed. The body likes the sweetness, but it says, chlorine, I'm not going to absorb this molecule. I don't know what to do with it. It's not absorbed. So, but then other ones like aspartame or ACE-K or other kind of complicated molecules that activate the sweet taste receptor but aren't absorbed or they are peed out. But the problem is they tend to trick the body. Okay. Well, first of all, if they're not absorbed, they'll have GI problems.
Which we see a lot of.
Yeah. And it could be unexplained tummy issues, dysbiosis, alteration in the gut microbiome. Otherwise, they just generally can trick the body. We have these sweet taste receptors not just in the mouth. Throughout the body, we have sweet taste receptors that will get activated. And basically, the body gets tricked into thinking there's calories coming in when there isn't. So if your brain thinks there's calories coming in when there isn't, what's it going to do? It's going to draw the calories out of your blood. It's going to uptake glucose because it thinks there's a lot coming in, but there's not. So what's going to happen next? You'll get hypoglycemic and hungry.
So that's what it's creating within us. These alternative sweeteners, when we're eating them, it's tricking our body.
Yeah.
And it's creating more hunger.
And studies show, even in children, that children or adults who habitually consume non-caloric sweeteners actually consume more calories during the day. There's no relationship between habitual sweetener use and lower body weight or lower calorie consumption. If anything, it's the opposite.
Wow. And it's crazy because all of them are in diet sodas, diet foods. So we would expect that dietarily it's going to do its job, but you're saying that as a reflex to the body, we're eating more actually because it's creating a hypoglycemic state and our body thinks we're starving.
Yeah, it's a reflex is a great word to describe that.
Wow. And do you have any opinion on things like stevia or maybe monk fruit? Do you feel that can be a good sugar substitute, or anything about them raising insulin, or are you okay with those?
They tend to do a little better in that regard, and they are naturally occurring. There's still absorption issues, so the long-term effects are unknown. Stevia may have some protective effects on the liver. We're actually doing some research on that currently. And then for me, at that point, it becomes taste. So we have stevia and monk fruit, not bad alternatives, not as bad as the others, but to me, I don't like the taste of them or the aftertaste. So what we're doing in Sugarproof is saying, okay, if you're going to bake a cookie or a cake, why not just use regular sugar but use less of it? That's one approach. Most recipes you can just cut the sugar by half. Right. Or in Sugarproof, we have recipes where we said, okay, we challenged ourselves. Can we make fun treats, cakes for kids or families with zero added sugars, using natural things like a banana or dates or dried mango fruit for mango cornbread? And we came up with some very creative ideas. For example, we have a blueberry muffin, which instead of having 10 grams of added sugar, if you buy a blueberry muffin at a coffee shop, has 0. And what we're doing there is, I'm not saying you have to do that all the time, but then you also get the natural taste of the blueberries or the bananas, because what's happening is sugar or these sweeteners are intense, very intense activators of the sweet taste profile. So it's almost like it overwhelms all the other tastes that you should be getting or could be getting from that food. So wouldn't it be better if we could eat a blueberry muffin and taste blueberries?
Right. And a lot of time, I've been guilty throughout my life at some point, having a blueberry muffin from probably in college at a coffee shop. Yeah. And it's just sweet. It's sweet bread.
Yeah, it doesn't taste like blueberries.
You even taste blueberries.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying.
So what we're trying to do is kind of almost retrain the system to appreciate better the natural tastes and the natural flavors and the natural sweetness, because artificial sweetness overwhelms everything almost.
Now, would that be the way then we have parents who are viewing and listening to take a step to change the palate for the children, is to use more natural sweeteners, like you said, dates or dried mango, things like that?
Yeah, not all the time, but as alternatives from time to time. And we're not saying you can never have added sugar again. We do have a 7-day no added sugar challenge that's part of Sugarproof, and the idea there is just to go 7 days just as a reset, just to reset everything, reboot the whole system, and to learn to appreciate what the sources of added sugars were in your diet and find alternatives. But then going forward, you can use the Sugarproof approaches of natural sweetness from bananas or dates, or you can cook with less sugar. Like at home, I will use coconut sugar if I'm baking, which I slightly prefer the taste of. It's slightly more sustainable crop. But the key is I'll use less of it. Now, trying to get my kids to use less of it is another challenge.
Right.
But if I'm making it, they won't notice the difference. They'll like it just as much.
That which makes sense, right? Like if dad or mom's making it, then they're gonna eat it. That's it.
Yeah.
I heard one time somebody was like, the way to get your kid to eat something is for them to know they ain't gonna eat anything else if they don't eat that, right? So they're
Yeah.
like, okay, well this is here, and this is my food, so they'll eat it at some point because that's their food. I don't know how good that advice is, but I did hear it, and I was like, that's interesting, because a lot of parents are like, my kid won't touch this, they won't touch this. For me, what was on the plate is my dinner. If I don't eat it, I'm not going to eat.
Yeah.
So but I had that understanding. But you said I did a sugar detox myself, and I don't eat too much sugar, but I'll have I eat a lot of fruit, and some snacks. But the 7-day, you notice how much sugar is part of your palate, part of your brain, part of your your sort of addiction, and it's weird. Like the second day, I'm like, oh, this is weird. Like, what do I eat then? I'm going to stay away from this. I'm going to stay away from this because I have a lot of smoothies too. But by the third, fourth day, fifth day, you come back and everything's more sweet. You go, ooh, that's way too sweet. Why was I eating that?
Yeah.
It sort of balances. It doesn't take too long either to get into balance, I believe.
No, I mean, and the 7 days wasn't chosen at random. I mean, it's based on research that shows that after several days, you will notice a difference in sweetness. After 5-6 days, you do get differences in blood levels of lipids and blood pressure, and all these metabolic things that you want to improve can be affected. But really, in our experience with families and kids, is just as you described, exactly as you described. Even with a 4 or 5-year-old, they will be difficult the first couple of days. There may be some discomfort. Why are you taking away my peanut butter? Why can't I have jam on my toast? Whatever their usual go-tos are, but it doesn't take long. A day or two, maybe some fog, headaches, withdrawal, because sugar is addictive. Sweetness is addictive. But almost in all cases, parents will tell us that after those first couple of days, it's almost like in many cases, new kids emerge, more stable energy, more focused, more balanced, as well, and a greater appreciation of actual food, of real food.
Right, of real food.
And,
So when you introduce the food, make sure it's whole foods, not the processed stuff that you may have been giving them. Put a little, just think about we talk about it a lot on the show. What foods can you start giving kids? Maybe more whole food based, right? Instead of having the Lucky Charms in the morning, maybe having some fruit, cut up fruit even, right? Are you okay with that? Do you think that's a okay move, or how do you feel about fruit as a whole?
I don't have a problem with fruit. The only one problem I have with fruit is eating a lot all at once. And by a lot, I mean a big bowl.
Right.
And I know myself because I have gout. And I, for a long time, could not find the source of the gout. My doctor told me it was alcohol. I don't drink alcohol. Told me it was meat. I eat meat every other month or something. And finally, I boiled it down. I realized it was when I ate a lot of fruit all at once. And I used to go to those fruit carts. There used to be one next to USC, and have that for my lunch, a big bowl of fruit.
Yeah.
And it was the big bowl of fruit that induced rapid, immediate swelling in my ankles, and it was gout. That's not to say I don't eat fruit. I love fruit. I just, I space it out during the day. I just won't have a big bowl all at once.
Same with me. I'll space it out. How have you found as a whole, how addictive is sugar, would you say?
I think it's very addictive. Now, a lot of people wouldn't use the addictive word. I mean, it gets into very kind of controversial territory, but I think what we spell out in Sugarproof, whether you want to call it addictive or not, is one thing, but I know for sure there are addictive tendencies. We just described some. It's hard to give up. When you do give it up, you have after effects, withdrawal.
Yeah.
You crave it. So these are all part of the definition of something that's addictive. So you may not want to call it addictive, but it has addictive tendencies for sure, and chemically in the brain as well. Studies show that it can be just as addictive, even more so than some addictive drugs.
So I always say, when I did a little stint in pediatrics in school, but one of my things is from the beginning, I say, how much sugar is your child eating? And more times than not, it was pretty high. It was pretty high. We broke down breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I found that removing sugar was one of the top 2 or 3 interventions as a whole for optimization or improvements cognitively, gastrointestinally, just behavior overall, their activity, right? Being able to focus in school. These are things that just literally like in a week can change.
Absolutely.
If you just take, a little audit of how much sugar your child's eating.
Yeah, and the no added sugar challenge that we walk you through in Sugarproof will do that. And, you prepare for it, you do it as a family, you discover all the sources, hidden sources of added sugar, you eliminate the usual culprits, whether that's your Lucky Charms at breakfast or your apple juice or your soda. Just eliminate them for a week. We're not going to give them up forever. And you'll get all those improvements. And then when you go back, you may go back to less of the Lucky Charms or less of the juice.
Right.
And, gradually it may sneak back and then you do it again. I mean, in our family, we'll do a 7-day no added sugar challenge every couple of months, like after the big holidays, for example.
I love that. Yeah, which is great because during the big holidays, that's a time to indulge. People do overindulge.
Yeah, post-Easter now is a good time, for example. We had our, chocolate candy binge over Easter, and that's great. It was fun.
Yeah.
But now maybe it's a good time to kind of reset that.
For sure. Little detox. I love that. All right. So Sugarproof is out. We can get our hands on it. We're going to have information all about how sugar is affecting children and interventions, things that we can do as a family to reduce that sugar intake. You got challenges, you got recipes, everything's in there.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So everyone viewing, listening, moms, dads, families, this is the book right now to ensure your child's overall health, because unless you're really on it, more likely than not, your child's eating too much sugar. I know I was when I was a kid. I was a little sugar fiend. So we can check out the book. Where else can we find you?
On Instagram, we're at Sugarproof Kids, as well as Facebook at Sugarproof Kids, Twitter at Michael Goran. We have a website, sugarproofkids.com. We have some of our recipes on there, new recipes that we're developing all the time. Most often are going on the website, and wherever books are sold, and in Kindle and audio format as well. Perfect.
Everything. We love it. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I think it's so important. I do think it's an epidemic we're leading towards. And I think so many of these diseases can be solved early on just through diet and particularly with sugar. So love the work you're doing, and thank you for coming on the show and really dropping some knowledge on us. I appreciate that.
Dr. G, thank you so much for taking the time and having me on the show and bringing this to the public. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Awesome conversation with Dr. Michael Goran. Really, it's no surprise how sugar affects the health, but it's really interesting to know how addictive it can be and how it's just everywhere. And we're thinking about that breakfast analogy. You can have 50, 60, 70 grams of sugar with no problem. So start making those interventions, get the book, start changing your child's palate to be less hyperpalatable to sugar and getting away from that bliss point. Rate, review, subscribe, go on the YouTube. If you haven't subscribed on the YouTube, show some love. Even if you don't watch YouTube, show us some love, right? This is what we do. I can't wait to present next week some really good information, and I hope you all have a great, great week.